So let's start with the project. Here the project build type will be Maven, language is Java, and we'll use the default version that is selected here. And here we will rename our project. I'll name it CWP, which is code with Pravendra, and the artifact is a short URL. The packaging is jar file, configuration is properties, and I'm using the Java 25. So let's start some dependencies here. We will use web, and we will use JPA. We will use MySQL connector, and we will need Lambok. And what else we need? We will need Spring Dev tools. I think we are fine with that. If we'll need anything else, we'll add it later. Let's generate our project. It's got downloaded. Let's go to downloads. Let's unzip this. So now let's open it in our IntelliJ. So I'm going to open this project. We will open it in a new window, and I'll close the old one. Okay, so here is the default structure that the Spring IO is going to give us. Now we are going to use some tools in this IntelliJ that I'll recommend you to install GitHub Copilot, as this is a very useful tool. If you'll get stuck somewhere, you can definitely ask your question and it will help you with that. So it's a great tool. So you can go to the marketplace and search for that. First of all, we'll need some entities. So instead of Java class, we'll create a package which is entity. So here we are going to create our URL entity. Entity. In this entity, we will need a private string, original URL, and then the short URL, and when it was created. So right, local date time created at. So these are the three things we'll need here. First of all, we'll use the entity for the JPA. So it will persist in database. Next, we'll use data, which is a Lambok dependency called constructor. So we'll add all R constructor and the no R constructor as well. So we have created this. Now we will need some ID as well. So long, and we will call it as our ID. So after ID, we'll use generated value, and the strategy is identity. Now this is our column, which is, so the original value we don't want it to be a null, so we'll take it false, and unique is not true. Okay, and we can keep the max length as well for original URL. So column was not resolved here. So the length is 2048. Now Let's edit it for the short URL as well. So that will be unique. Unique is true, and the length is, we'll keep the max length as, let's suppose 25. And for local date time, we don't want this to be null, as well as we don't want it to be updatable as well, because that will be a one-time value. So we have this ready. We can add few more things here, like table, that is URL, and we can add here indexes as well. Okay, that is fine. It's ready. Now let's create a controller class here. Let's define a package for this controller, and in this controller we'll have a new URL shortener container, shortener controller. This is our REST controller. We will create some method that we have discussed earlier. So in that post mapping, v1 slash shorten. So that will generate a short URL and return that. Here we'll not return the string, we'll return the response entity, and we will return the URL response that we will create in few moment. We'll accept the URL request that is also not created. So that's why it's giving an error. So let's create URL response and request first of all in entity. URL request. So in this URL request, we'll need the original URL. So, okay, fine. We'll import it here. Same goes with the, so we have this URL response. So in this URL response, we'll have the short URL, and we will import this class, and we are fine. Let's create a service package. URL service, URL service, that is service only. In the service, we will have a URL service class. We'll refactor this. Now we'll create URL service here. So that's a service class. We'll annotate it with the service. And now what we can do in our controller, we can use this service. We can auto wire that service, and we will import that class. Fine. Now we will use our URL service, and we will say generate short URL, and we will hit the original URL from our URL request, and we'll pass it function that is not created yet. We'll create that in our service class. So here what we need to do, look, we want to give the URL response and make it as a response entity, right? What we'll say here, we are going to give the response entity of URL response. In order to generate a short URL from the original URL, we need to first of all, we'll need to check whether this URL is empty or not. If this string is null or is not there, we will just throw an exception that you'll need to have something in the original URL, right? So we'll check if this original URL is null, is not equals to null, and end, not empty, right? And which is and end original URL dot size should be greater than 0. Okay, if it is not null and the size is greater than 0, then we will do something. We'll look at it, but in else part we will return that it's an invalid URL, right? So that's a bad request. So what we are going to do with this original URL, we have to create a short URL out of it, right? So first of all, we will create the URL entity here, URL entity. So how we are going to create this short URL out of it? We will store it in a database. We will get the ID of this URL entity, right? That will be created when we will store that. And by using that ID, we will create a using a base 62 encoder, we will encode that value and we will use it as a short URL, right? So in this URL entity, we will set the original URL only, and now we will save it. First of all, I'll just delete that, create uh, not class, we'll create a package, a repository. So that repository package we'll need to create. In this we have an interface which is URL repository. So that is created. We will implement here. We'll implement the JPA repository. On that will be extend because it's also an interface, right? So we have this repository ready. We will annotate it with repository. So now we can use this repository in our service class. So we'll auto wire that and we will say we need URL repository, and now we can use this repository. Okay, so size is not there in this string, my bad, is length. So it can be replaced with this, so we'll replace with that. Okay, so that's a suggestion by idea. Now, so we'll need to store that URL repository dot save the object that we have just created, which is our URL entity. Now that will just give us that URL repository URL entity, right? So URL entity is from database, right? URL entity from DB, and we will use the ID from this DB, create this short URL out of base 62 encoder, right? So we have to, first of all, we need to create a base 62 encoder. So let's create a utility package, utility package, and in this utility package we'll create base 62 encoder class. So here, this is the code that Copilot had suggested me, and that's what I've said. So in base 62 we have all the 62 characters, right? from A to Z, capital A to Z and small a to Z, and then 0 to 9, which is 62 characters. And how we are going to encode this? So we'll have that ID, right? And we will use that ID. We will mod it by 62 and we will get any value out of here from base 62 string, and we will append it, and we will do for every value from the ID. And after that we'll reverse the string because that is in a reverse order, and we will return the encoded value. So that's our utility to basically convert our ID into a encoded value. So let's go back to our service class, and we will use this base62 encoder now. Dot encode, and what we'll use URL entity from db dot get id. So that will give us the short URL, right? String, we'll call it short URL. And now what we will do, we will say URL entity db dot set the short URL here, the short URL. We will save it again in our repository, and we will create a new URL response here, and we will return that response. So we have completed this generate short URL method. Now it's time to test this method, whether it is working fine or not. So by the way, we'll need to add some properties file as well for the DB connections. So that is there in our application.properties. So I have them handy with me. I'll provide in the description so you guys can also copy paste those properties, use them directly. So here I'll just paste it simply. So basically we have the URL where we have our localhost running. So in our, I mean the not the localhost, which is our SQL server, which is running on 3306 port, and we have the username and the password here, and we have the all the JPA related properties file, and some I have added the Redis as well that will be used later on. So let's not go deep into this, and let's start our service. First of all, let's go back to our application, and we will, there's some error here. We have not returned this value. Fine, now we can run our application. Let's run this. So our application has this some error warning I'm getting about Lambok and saying we can enable annotation processing. Let's enable it. So our server started on 8080. Let's test this. How we can test this? So we need to have the Postman installed. So let's open the Postman. Let's go. I have my Postman here. So here that's a v1, right? And so that is the URL which we are going to run on our local host 8080 v1 short, and that's the path that we have created. And we'll need to give the body here. So what was the original URL, right? So here we have a original URL in our URL. We will need to pass the URL request here. So here we have the original URL. So let's pass the original URL here. So let's suppose we'll give the lead code. Let's send it. Say, so we have got an error here, which is invalid URL. Okay, so not an empty thing. Let's see what's the issue here. We need to check our controller. we are not using the path variable here, right guys? Not path variable, we are not using it as a response body, request body. We need to restart the server. Let's run it. It's running. Now send this. So we got this, right? So here we have a ID which is 5 returned here for short URL, right? But there's one more thing that we need to do here. It is returning only 5, but we'll need to append our domain name as well, right? So what we will do, we'll go back to our service class. So before storing this short URL, we will append this with our domain, right? Short URL. Yeah, this is the one. So after that, it will return something like this, the local domain, and then the 5 will be there. So let's rerun that. Now, whenever we'll try to hit this, it is returning the whole domain here. So if we'll try to click here, nothing will open, right? Because we have not created a mapping here. So in the next part, we'll do that.